the media, if they're smart, they're going to bow down and kiss the ring. If they're not, they're just going to be flushed down the toilet. This is it's so much fun to watch the mainstream media, which has been self-destructive and just egomaniacal, just implode upon itself, and they have no one to blame. They have no one to blame but each other, and that's exactly what they're doing. There's blood in the water. They smell it. They know that the end is near, and they're doing everything that they possibly can think to do to make sure that it's all about self-preservation with the media, folks. It's all about self-preservation. We'll get to more of that here in just a minute. What's up? This is Mark K. Saves the Republic, and I appreciate everyone joining us today. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the notifications, because if you don't subscribe and you don't hit the notifications, then you're not going to get notified whenever we go live, whenever we post content, whenever we upload a brand new video, which we do not just every Monday through Friday at noon, but all the time, like all the time. All I do, it seems like, is edit and post video, and a lot of people are appreciative of that. Some are not. But if you're one of the ones that's appreciative, please hit subscribe and make sure that you get those notifications going too, because that is very important. There's been a lot of news coming out over the weekend about President Trump's potential nominations and appointments. There's been a lot of news, most of it fake, about the nominations and appointments that President Trump has already made. There is a concerted effort to thwart President Trump's attempts to get the people in the cabinet that he wants in the cabinet. There is a concerted effort to try and badmouth and diminish and tarnish the reputations of the people that President Trump has chosen to be on his team to lead America back to greatness. There is a concerted effort not just among the media and the left, but among Republicans who are out there to try and assert their dominance over President Trump, even though the American electorate, by like a massive majority, by like a lot of people, like so many people, not just the electoral victory, but also the popular vote, the whole country moving to the right. Everything's just bright red. Kamala Harris is like 2 million. She's down by like 3 million votes. It's insane how popular President Trump has become. And if you don't believe me, just, you know what you do, just, you don't have to look any farther than the UFC this weekend. President Trump went to the UFC this weekend this is great. Before we get to the media stuff, I want to share this with you. I don't know if you saw this, but President Donald Trump went to the UFC. And the UFC was in Madison Square Garden, which means that he's been at Madison Square Garden a lot. He went right before the election. You may remember when Kill Tony made that joke about Puerto Rico being a floating pile of garbage. And he went back this weekend with all his boys, his entire entourage. Look, in this photo, you can see Eric in the background there. You can see Elon right next to him. You can see Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I guess she's not a boy. Vivek's in there. Kid Rock peeking around the corner. RFK Jr. even made it. And Mike, I'm super short Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives. I never knew how short Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, was until I saw this photo of him at the UFC fight at Madison Square Garden with the group. Look at this. He's shorter than Elon and President Trump and RFK Jr. They're all very tall individuals, but he's even shorter than Tulsi Gabbard by several inches. This is a short guy. No, that's why he's not sitting down in the plane. There was a photo that went viral over the weekend of President Trump, Elon Musk, Don Jr., RFK Jr., all sitting around a table on Trump Force One eating McDonald's. And it went viral for a couple of reasons. Number one, RFK Jr. was eating McDonald's, which is weird because that dude's like, it's poison. McDonald's is poison. Why are you eating it? He said Donald Trump's diet is abhorrent. He said that it's very, very bad. He's not a fan of fast food. In fact, he's been tasked with, his whole thing is, we got to make America healthy again. And it was a little ironic. People pointed out that he was eating McDonald's on the plane. Now, in all fairness, we don't know that he was eating it. He's kind of holding it. He's holding the Big Mac or whatever it is. He's holding, the fries are in front of him on a tray. There's a Coke next to him. And it appears that the level of the Coke is diminished a little bit, like someone had been taking some swigs out of the bottle. But there's no photographic or video evidence that it was actually JFK who was doing that. So, it could have just been like a fun photo. A lot of people are also saying, you know what it is? This is just like a fraternity initiation. This is just a fraternity initiation. They're just trying to goad him. They're just trying to make him, because he's brand new. He's new to the group. He's new to the party. I mean, he's a Kennedy, for crying out loud. But the fact of the matter is, look at Mike Johnson. I used to think that Mike Johnson was just kind of like in the back, an afterthought, which he probably was. I mean, he clearly looks like the guy that, the boss called him and said, we're going out for drinks. And he's like, oh, I don't really drink. He's like, just get out of here. We're going out. And he kind of was forced to go. He took off his tie at the last minute and he's hanging in the background. But I think maybe he was standing because it's the first time he seems like he's tall. He's finally towering over these other four individuals instead of looking up to them the way he does. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It was an amazing event. And Donald Trump got a hero's welcome at the UFC. Not only did he get a hero's welcome, but he also got the belt. John Jones. John the Bones Jones. He had an amazing fight. And after he got done, he got up. He thanked President Trump and Jesus. And then he jumped over the cage. He did the President Trump dance and then awarded his UFC championship belt to President Trump, who was just so excited. Look at him. He's beaming. He's so excited. I mean, this is a victory lap for President Trump at the UFC with a bunch of people who, were really part of his entire success, part of his campaign and part of his victory. And what better place to go celebrate other than with those people that helped you get there in the first place. So anyway, it was a fun night. I wasn't there. I watched it. It was so funny because on Friday night, there was a big fight on Netflix, which not a lot of people saw because Netflix was buffering. It was between Jake Paul and Iron Mike Tyson. And spoiler alert, Jake Paul won that fight and Netflix lost because, again, they couldn't handle the amount of people that were watching. But the interesting thing was, as soon as President Trump showed up at the UFC, you didn't hear anything about anything else about the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight. I was all over. It all became about President Trump, the UFC, fight night at Madison Square Garden. It was incredible. He silenced talk of any other fight. And that was, just again, the power of President Trump. But let's talk about the media, shall we? The media is bowing down to President Trump. They're surrendering. They've thrown up the white flag and they're saying, you win, we're not worthy. And some people in the media are actually sucking up to Donald Trump. They're brown-nosing. They're making the trip down to Mar-a-Lago, and they're talking to President Trump, and they're doing whatever it is they can to get into his good graces. Because as members of the media, they realize this guy is not only in control of the White House and access to the White House and access to, one-on-one exclusive interviews, that kind of thing, but he's also got the majority of the country behind him. I mean, the majority of the country is behind President Trump. We harken back to those massive victories that he brought in just a couple of weeks ago. And so Morning Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, his emotional support animal, were on television this morning, and they shared a story which, I'm going to be honest with you, angered so many of their quote unquote fans. I don't know if you call them fans or I don't know what you would call them. But Joe and Mika, Morning Joe and Mika Brzezinski, discussed how they made a trip on Friday to Mar-a-Lago, a.k.a., Hitler's realm, according to them, and met with President Donald Trump, who they have spent the last 4 years demonizing. They met with him and they came to an accord. Listen to this.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues. And
by the way, that the people who watch that show, that's a smaller and smaller number by the day. I digress.
Told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
This is where people start to get really angry, because when you're a Democrat, and think about this is an important distinction. Democrats have been trained, they've been raised, they've been brainwashed, they've been it's been browbeaten into them that Republicans are wrong, Republicans are bad. Donald Trump is the leader of this revolution of racist, bigoted, homophobic, misogynistic, xenophobic, white supremacists. He's the new Hitler, and everybody on his side is just a radical. And this comes from the White House down. Joe Biden stood in front of that big red church and said, these are radical people. These are right-wing crazies. Yeah, he called us garbage just a couple weeks before the election. So this has been inundated in the thought processes of many on the left, and especially the media. It's been their job to do it. They've said there is no common ground. There is no working with these people. There's no negotiating with President Donald Trump. He can't get back into the White House. If he gets back into the White House, it'll be the end of democracy. It'll be the end of our country as we know it. And now that Donald Trump is going back to the White House, they've got to backtrack. They've got to figure out a way to explain to their viewers, okay, it's not the end of democracy. We were wrong. Okay, maybe he's not a racist, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic, white supremacist extremist like we've been telling you he is. And as you can imagine, a lot of their viewers are very angry, which I'll share with you in just a minute. But listen carefully to how they ended this.
5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different. And that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
By the way, what she said about, for 80 million Americans, election denialism and public trials and, all the other stuff, that wasn't as important as the other issues. Those were the issues. They just don't want to realize that. They don't want to realize that they were wrong on every issue. That the Americans thought that they were being attacked when President Trump was being attacked, and that they didn't like seeing what the government was up to. Hence, we have now this new administration that is going to curb government intervention, that is going to make sure that the media is under control and can no longer censor Americans. They're going to bring back freedom of speech, which is, ironically, look, the First Amendment is very important for multiple reasons. It gives you the freedom to practice the religion that you want. That's ultimate to the founding of this country. I mean, the Puritans came over and they were seeking a place where they could be religiously active without anybody persecuting them. That's what this country was founded on. It was all about God. Then it was freedom of speech, because you need to be able to speak freely against your government, against your leadership, against anyone without fear of retribution or jailing or murder or getting your head chopped off by the guillotine, any of those things. Then, of course, the freedom of the press, which is very exciting. And it's ironic to me that the press, who exist under the same freedoms that give us speech, are proponents of freedom of the press, but opponents of freedom of speech, when they're all wrapped up nicely in the same package called the First Amendment. But again, with these people, really nothing should be surprising. Now, as far as the response, like I said, the people that follow these folks were not happy at all. Here's just some of the comments on X. Tigger wrote, "Read between the lines. Their ratings got so bad, if they don't change course, they will be fired." It's a good point, Tigger. Susan wrote, I am furious about this. This is normalizing Trump. Did they pay him money to stay at the classified document outpost? I imagine Susan's referring to Mar-a-Lago as the classified document outpost. Fun fact, by the way, President Trump had the power to declassify those documents, so you should probably just call it the document outpost. They should only command bottom of the barrel guests. May their ratings tank. Already have. There's a wordy dirt. We won't read that one. Morning Joe. Oh, we won't read that one either. There's a lot of bad words in this. You're a fool for believing them in the first place. All the integrity of wilted spinach. I mean, it goes on and on. They lied to you for years. Now you're going to have to accept the truth. It's just over and over. It goes on and on and on with the comments about how Morning Joe and MSNBC and the rest of these major news media networks realize now that they were wrong, that nobody was buying what they were selling, and that President Trump is firmly in charge of their futures. And so they have two choices: leave, call it quits, get out of Dodge, or bow down to President Trump, beg forgiveness, and make sure that he knows, oh, no, we're on your side. We're here to help. We want to work with you. We want to talk to you. Well, for the millions of people that they've been selling this whole bag of goods to, talking to Donald Trump is like negotiating with terrorists. Misogynistic, racist, homophobic, white supremacist terrorists. And they can't believe it. So this is all gonna backfire on MSNBC. But they're not the only ones. CNN is doing it too. CNN had a panel on, and they were talking about President Trump, specifically what happened at the UFC and some of his cabinet picks. And listen to how they described President Trump now that he's coming back to office.
And it really looks like ancient Rome here. This is sort of the conquering Republican Caesar who's going into the Colosseum and everyone's cheering, and he's got his political gladiators with him. That appearance isn't just about him enjoying the applause. He's sending a message to the Senate.
For sure.
Like, not only are you entertained, but these are my people, and are you willing to fight? Because here's who I have.
And are any of us surprised by this? I feel like for anybody who has been covering Trump's campaign or his movement the past few years, these picks, sure, they're raising eyebrows, to say the least, but
a familiar character.
Yes, exactly. They've been with him at all these rallies. They've played a key role in where he's at now.
Yeah.
CNN is saying, look, here's President Trump. He's the Roman gladiator. He's returning to power, the conquering hero, and he brings with him all of his generals and lieutenants and all of these centurions who've helped him get to where he is, and now are going to help him take back Rome and make it the greatest republic in the history of the world. There's Tulsi Gabbard, there's Vivek Ramaswamy, there's Elon Musk, there's Kid Rock. Okay, all right. Kid Rock's not going to be in the cabinet, although Kid Rock did post on X over the weekend he would like a position in the liquor cabinet. Kid Rock's always good. Kid Rock's always good for a dad joke, isn't he? I love that guy. Anyway, but that's, and it's a fair assessment. And President Trump was smart to do this. I mean, he's smart anyway, but he was smart to do this because he was sending a message. He was saying, look, I'm going to a place where I am very popular. I'm going to a place where I'm going to walk in and they're going to scream and yell and chant my name. And the people in the ring are going to come out and they're going to give me gifts, which we saw happen. I'm going to be the main event, and I'm not even fighting. I've already fought. We're going to go back to Washington, D.C. and fight all of these people here. I am their emperor, and they are here to serve me. Oh, and these people that I brought with me, these are my lieutenants. These are my fighters. This is my team. If the Senate does not endorse or confirm these people, and this includes not just the folks that were present, but Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth, and everyone else on that President Trump may throw in their faces. If they do not confirm these folks, they will be dealing not just with the wrath of President Trump, but with the hundreds of thousands of people who were in Madison Square Garden and watching at home, and the millions more who voted for President Trump. They didn't vote for Republicans. They didn't vote for the GOP. They didn't vote for any of that. They voted for President Trump. It's President Trump and the 80 million people he brought with him to the party against everybody else. And if you were smart, Republicans, you wouldn't get in his way. Unfortunately, the Republicans are not very smart. Republicans, that's the one thing we've learned about Republicans. They still think, for a lot of them, they still think that they are there for some other reason than the fact that President Trump is the most popular conservative leader we've had in a very long time. They think that they're there on their own accord. They think that they're there to do the will of the people, and that the will of the people is not what they believe the will of the people is. I mean, they have all these weird ideas and concepts of reality. And, it's going to be a problem because, it's going to be a small problem for President Trump because there are a lot of nominations that have come forward that they say are questionable. There's a lot of nominations that are coming forward that they say they are going to get in the way of. And that's going to be an issue. In fact, John Fetterman, to me, is more likable these days than a lot of Republicans in the Senate. John Fetterman said in an interview, listen to this. John Fetterman said he tells fellow Democrats to chill on Trump. He hasn't even been inaugurated yet. Senator John Fetterman, a message to fellow Democrats regarding President-elect Trump and his appointments is to chill because he hasn't been inaugurated. And that's the thing. If you're already exhausted, freaking out, and it's not even Thanksgiving, you really ought to pace yourselves because he hasn't even been inaugurated. So you really have to chill out, and you're going to have to be more discerning or discriminate on what's going to freak you out or what's just trolling, because it's not the weather, it's the climate now for the next 4 years. I don't know when John Fetterman became so intelligent and likable. John Fetterman says exactly what everyone else is thinking is you can't freak out every time Donald Trump does something. You can't react this way every time Donald Trump appoints somebody that you don't agree with. Every time he says Matt Gaetz is actually going to be the best choice for Attorney General and he's who I want running the Department of Justice, you can't have a conniption fit and throw your head against the wall. And then the next day turn around and do it even harder when he picks RFK Jr. And then remember, you're still kind of freaked out about Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth and his tattoos. Which is the Democrats hate Pete Hegseth's tattoos, which is weird. I thought all Democrats got tattoos, but that's a whole other story. And the Senate needs to realize pretty quickly, if not, they'll realize pretty soon that it's not their party anymore. It's President Trump's party, and it's not really technically their pick. Yes, they're there to confirm Donald Trump's appointments, but he's going to appoint these people either way. And he's got the weight of the people behind him. In fact, John Rich wrote accurate. He posted this meme, GOP and voters, the big eagle and the tiny little elephant. And that's exactly right. The GOP is cowering and quaking with the idea that these 80 million people, many of them Democrats, many of them independents, many of them African Americans and Latino Americans and soccer moms and people and gay folk and people who've never voted for a Republican ever. They came and they voted for Donald Trump. Not a Republican. They voted for President Trump. That's who has the power. That's what they need to deal with. And if President Trump makes a nomination or a pick for his cabinet, they need to realize that's who Donald Trump wants because Donald Trump has a vision. And that's not Donald Trump's vision. It's a vision that he promised the people of the United States of America and that 80 million of those people voted for. He said, on day one, I will make sure that we close the border and we drill, baby, drill. I'm going to be a dictator on day one, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to start the most massive deportation event in the history of the world. And that's what he plans to do. And that's why he chose Tom Homan as the border czar. No other job but border. Focus on the border, close down the border, shut down the border, secure the border, and then round up all of these illegal criminals and get them out of here. That's Tom Homan's only job. On top of that, he has Kristi Noem, governor of South Dakota, who is the Secretary of Homeland Security. And she will be working with Tom Homan to make sure that every single border is secure, that our country is not under threat, and that all of these illegal criminals are sent packing. And that was his number one promise to America. And then it was drill, baby, drill. We've got to become energy independent. We've got to make sure that we bring back our energy independence and become a net exporter of energy. We can't send money to Iran and Russia and Venezuela and all these crazy tyrannical people. We can't give them billions of dollars a day so we can fuel our own economy when we have so much liquid gold, Texas tea. We got so much of the crude running underneath our own shore, more than any other country. People don't realize this. The United States of America has more natural oil reserves and resources underneath the crust of our earth than any other country. If we drilled at maximum capacity, we would be richer than the United Arab Emirates, than any of the other, in Saudi Arabia. We would all be driving around in BMWs. The government could be paying our salaries forever. I mean, it would be incredible. We would be the dominant economic, military, and energy producing force, but we've been shackled by our own government because, well, you know the thing. And now Donald Trump has made some more picks. He said, hey, you know what? All right, I got Doug Burgum from North Dakota. He's going to be Secretary of the Interior. He's going to make sure that we get all of these land leases passed. We're going to make sure we start drilling. He's going to make sure everything's fine. And also, I'm going to appoint this dude named Chris Wright. Donald Trump over the weekend announced Chris Wright as Energy Secretary. I'm thrilled to announce that Chris Wright will be joining my administration as both the United States Secretary of Energy and member of the newly formed Council of National Energy. Chris has been a leading technologist and entrepreneur in energy. He has worked in nuclear, solar, geothermal, and oil and gas. Most significantly, Chris was one of the pioneers who helped launch the American shale revolution that fueled American energy independence and transformed the global energy markets and geopolitics. This guy, in case you don't know who he is, this guy is a fracker. This guy fracks. This guy is one of the biggest frackers in the country. This guy created a fracking company, Liberty Oil, and he grew it to one of the largest companies, one of the largest energy companies in the country. It's traded on the New York Stock Exchange. This guy built his entire self-worth, his whole entire net worth on fracking. So those of you in Pennsylvania who weren't sure whether or not Donald Trump or Kamala Harris was the right choice, all you union workers out there, people in West Virginia and all the other places where they frack, guess what? Donald Trump just picked a fracker and put him in charge of the Department of Energy. You're welcome. You're going to be fine. Your jobs are secure. Fracking lives. No matter what Kamala Harris says. She was flip-flopping on fracking for years. Donald Trump was always like, look, fracking's great, and we're going to keep doing it, and we're going to be dominant. Chris Wright actually wrote a piece for, what is this? Real Clear Politics? Is that right? Yeah. Commentary, How Trump Can Win on Energy. Zero energy poverty. Zero energy poverty, because the Democrats have always talked about net zero carbon emissions, which is, he claims, and a lot of other people do, a recipe for disaster, for economic ruin. Net zero emissions destroys everything in this country. It makes us all poor, and we can't feed our families, we can't put gas in our car, we can't do anything, and it makes us weak. And it is a recipe for disaster. So he's promoting something called zero energy poverty, which means you can have it all. You can buy groceries, you can buy a house, you can put gas in your car, you can drive wherever you want, and it's all affordable because, fun fact, it's all interrelated. The food that you buy that's too expensive is too expensive because gas is more expensive, and it costs more to put gas in the truck that delivers your food to the grocery store. It costs more to run the tractor that harvests the grain. Any and all American energy products, when they go up in price, everything else goes up in price because energy is what drives every other industry. If you go to the store to buy, I don't know what you're buying at the store, video games or sex toys or whatever it is, all of those things arrive on trucks, which run on diesel, which has seen a dramatic increase in price over the 4 years that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been president and vice president. So what happens? Do the video game companies and the sex toy companies say, you know what? We're just gonna suck up that extra cost. No, they pass it on to the consumer. They're like, your sex toy and your video game, they're all gonna cost more. Why? Well, because it costs us more to get to the store. How much do you really want them? Net zero emissions or zero energy poverty? I take the latter. So does Donald Trump, and Chris Wright is going to get us there. It's an all-encompassing thing. President Trump also made another nomination over the weekend. He nominated Brendan Carr as the FCC chairman. Now, Brendan Carr is already on the FCC. He's one of two Republicans. There's two Republicans on the FCC, and Brendan Carr is one of them. He was appointed by President Trump back in 2017, and now President Trump is making him the chairman of the FCC. And this is great because he will fight back against censorship. Here's a letter he wrote just a couple of weeks ago. This is to Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Mark Zuckerberg over at Meta, aka Facebook, Instagram. Dear, and then he writes all their names. Over the past few years, Americans have lived through an unprecedented surge in censorship. Your companies played significant roles in this improper conduct. Big tech companies silenced Americans for doing nothing more than exercising their First Amendment rights. They targeted core political, religious, and scientific speech, and they worked often in concert with so-called media monitors and others to defund, demonetize, and otherwise put out of business news outlets and organizations that dared to deviate from an approved narrative. Congressional investigations, press reports, and other evidence showed that in many cases you did not act alone. Rather, you participated in a censorship cartel that included not only technology and social media companies, but advertising, marketing, and so-called fact-checking organizations, as well as the Biden-Harris administration itself. The relevant conduct extended from removing or blocking social media posts to labeling whole websites or apps as untrustworthy or high risk. How often have you gone to a website and it's like, oh, don't go to this place, and you click, I want to go there anyway, and it's talking about, masks, or it's talking about the election, or it's talking about something like that. It's amazing. That is all part of this overreaching censorship, according to FCC now chairman Brendan Carr. This letter, by the way, this is a fantastic. It reads so well. The censorship cartel is an affront to Americans' constitutional freedoms and must be completely dismantled. Americans must be able to reclaim their right to free speech. Indeed, our democracy depends on freedom of expression. You got Tom Homan, who's going to go down there, shut down the border, doesn't give a rat's patootie what anyone says about him, and he's going to send all these illegals packing. Check. You've got Doug Burgum and Chris Wright, who are going to open up America to more drilling for our own natural resources than you have ever seen before. He's going to unleash the American energy industry. It's going to be electric. No pun intended. It's actually going to be nuclear because they're big fans. They're all big fans of nuclear. I'm a big fan of nuclear. Do you remember when nuclear energy was supposed to be the best thing in the world? Do you not remember in Back to the Future when Doc Brown came back from the future and he put the banana peel and the beer can into the Mr. Fusion and he powered his flux capacitor with nuclear energy? That was supposed to be the future, but because of regulation and because of the Green New Deal and because of Democrats and because of fear-mongering, they decided, no, nuclear is bad. Well, not anymore. There's a new game in town. And now we've got an FCC chairman who's going to fight back against the ridiculous and unnecessary censorship and fact-checking by all these social media companies, and we know it because he wrote it down in a letter. No, that was dated November 13th. And like 4 days later, he became FCC chairman. You think that's a coincidence? I don't think so. I think that's pretty good. And President Trump, there's nothing that he won't do to fulfill his promise to make America great again. For example, Tom Fitton wrote, good news. Reports are the incoming real Donald Trump administration prepared to declare a national emergency and will use military assets to reverse the Biden invasion through a mass deportation program. Now, Tom Fitton wrote that on Truth Social and said, I'm hearing